And he put before them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that someone took and sowed in his field. It is the smallest of all seeds, but when it is grown, it is the greatest of shrubs and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and make their nests in its branches. He told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed in with 3 measures of flour until all of it was leavened. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field, which someone found and hid. Then in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has and buys the field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls. On finding one pearl of great value, he went and sold all that he had and bought it. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was thrown into the sea and caught fish of every kind. When it was full, they drew it ashore, sat down and put the good in the basket, but threw out the bad. So it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come out and separate the evil from the righteous.
So we've been talking about the parables, and the first group of parables that I chose were kind of about personal transformation, how life is. We sort of talked about what the context is for certain things, about whether you're invited to a wedding banquet and how prepared you are when you come, or how it is when you're given resources and what you do with those resources over the course of your life or your period of stewardship. And then we talked about what it's like to serve an absent landlord and how powerful that experience can be when you kind of turn things upside down, where you look at relationships and process before you look at the results. But the parable today, even though some of those other parables talk about the kingdom of heaven or how it might be like the kingdom of heaven, when Jesus describes the kingdom of heaven, when he really talks about the qualities of that alone, like how is it in the kingdom of heaven, he uses different metaphors than the stories that we had before. He compares it to a seed. And it's like he's speaking to people in their context, like we talked before about what are the common people? How do they relate to the stories that he tells? How do they know that what he's saying is so meaningful? Why do they get it? And I think one of the reasons they get it is because of the kind of examples that he gave in the parable today, because they were farmers. They were people that grew their crops. They knew what it was for a seed to be used to grow a tree or something like food for the table. So the focus in these is not about the person, it's more about the qualities of heaven itself. So if we want to look a little bit deeper into this parable, we kind of have to look behind the story a little bit. In a way, what he's saying is that heaven is a little bit hidden. But it's not the kind of hidden that's in something like Gnosticism, where you need a special teaching or something that requires a special teacher to give you a special kind of knowledge, something that's only given to initiates or something like that. This is more kind of like hidden in plain sight, meaning it's right in front of us if we have eyes to see, if we have ears to hear, this quality of heaven is something that we can feel and see and understand because it's part of the way we live. So there's kind of an invitation into this hidden world. As I was preparing for the sermon, I looked up some of the Bible references and I looked at other sermons that were given on some of these topics. And even though I have my unique take on things, which you guys get to hear all the time, I really like the language that I've always been a big fan of Barbara Brown Taylor, an Episcopal priest that some of her sermons have been published. And as I was reading some of the things that she said about these parables, I really liked the adjectives that she used to describe heaven the way Jesus was presenting it to the people around him. So when we think of a mustard seed, sure, we can think of the potential. We can think of that it grows into a big tree, but her adjectives for this were how the mustard seed and the leaven in the flour are small, but surprising and potent. So when we think of heaven having a certain kind of quality, it's that potency, that surprise that comes when you see the effect of it on whatever it exists inside of, meaning the potential that is in the seed, the small amount of leaven that's in the flour. And then the treasures in the field, or the great pearl of high value, of great price. They're not seen as something that is, well, the value there is something that's attainable in a certain kind of way. In other words, it's in and around us in some places, but we have to be kind of attentive to find it. We have to be able to see and understand what is of true value. Because in both of those examples, the treasure in the field and the pearl, the person that finds it or sees it recognizes the value. So there's a little bit of a nudge there to think about heaven as something of such great value that we should know it in a deeper way. And then the hard part is the net that's cast into the sea. But think about it this way. It's something that reaches down deep and it happens to us. In other words, we're hauled into the boat. We're there with everybody else. There's the righteous and there's the bad. And if we're paying attention to ourselves, we're going to have all of these things happening around us that we may or may not understand. We don't know what's going on inside the life of another human being. We don't know what it's like to be caught in this net of life. And yet, there's something important happening, and our righteousness or our commitment gives us access to this quality of heaven that exists within us, that exists in the world around us. Again, it's something that's around us, it's in plain sight, it's hidden, but it's not concealed. In other words, it hasn't been purposely hidden so that we don't get it. It's there, but we have to kind of look in a different way. And so if you look at all of these parables that Jesus is saying, he's kind of giving a full picture, but you have to look at all of them, read all of them, spend some time with all of them in such a way that you understand what part talks about the person, what part talks about life, the context of what's going on. And then what part talks about the qualities of what happens inside of us when we're exposed to this surprising and potent, rare, but attainable thing that happens to us. We have a part in it. We have something inside of us that helps us recognize it. And by moving toward it, it all of a sudden captures us in such a way that we give up everything to find it. We give up everything by surrendering to it. We recognize the value of it in such a way that it becomes the one thing of the most value in our life. There's other ways that we can approach it. There's other ways that we get there. And I think probably the most important way that we get there individually is with things like kindness and compassion. It's that small moment, that hidden moment that says something along the lines of what we say every Sunday, that God is here, now, everywhere, and always. That it's present. I don't know how many of you saw the film Don't Look Up. It was on. There's one small moment in that film. It passes by so quickly that if you're not paying attention, you might not feel the impact of it. But they're sitting around the dinner table, and I think it's Leonardo DiCaprio who says, "We really did have everything." So the end of the world is approaching, and he says, "We really did have everything." And I think heaven is a little bit like that. It's here. We have it. It's not far away. It's attainable. It's surprising. It's potent. And it'll capture you if you're willing. I think one way of understanding this that we may have, I don't want to say we've lost it. I just want to say that sometimes we're not aware of it, or we don't do the work of understanding it, is that when we read a text in the Bible, when we give attention to it, when we see it as something that we're wrestling with because it has deeper meaning, it's almost like the context of that study lets us know something is important. But the same thing is true of life. That if we see the things that are happening in the world around us, if we see them as having meaning and depth, if we see every interaction as an opportunity to go deeper in our understanding, then I think we begin to understand what these parables are saying. But it takes work to do that. It takes a willingness to spend the time with another person. It takes a willingness to look with a broader perspective without judgment. Sort of like the reflection that inside some of these very difficult moments in life, there is a seed that's small, that's potent, that's surprising, that something comes out of that later We have to have a kind of a patience and understanding that says, I can wait. I can have that witnessing kind of presence that will allow the world to change in front of my eyes. And I think that's what Jesus is asking us to do with these metaphors. He's asking us to look at the world in such a way that we can understand that we really do have everything. We don't need anything more. It's all here right now, in this moment, everywhere and always.